Welcome to another edition of Ask Skill Builder, where you send in the questions and we try to answer them if we can, or maybe the people watching try and answer them. Our team of unseen, unsung heroes out there who are waiting for your problems. Anyway, let's get on with it. And here's a plumbing question from Alex Porter, and he said he's changing his sister-in-law's tap washer, or he's trying to fix her leaky tap anyway. And he said he's taken these little star heads off the top, cross heads. There's a Phillips screw there, but he can't find out how to take the rest of the tap off. He said he's done ceramic cartridges before, but these ones have got him stumped. Actually, the design of these taps are made to look like taps with washers. They may actually be with cartridges, but they're made to look like old-fashioned taps. And the key to it is that when you take that star off the top, the next thing you've got to do is take that silver shroud, which is the bit of chrome around there. You've got to unscrew that, and under there is the nut that allows you to take the tap off. Now, when you take that chrome cap off, I've seen people put a wrench on that and scratch it, so it's very important that you put something around to stop it being damaged. And what I would say is, if you've got a little scrap of old bicycle inner tube, and who hasn't somewhere, get the bicycle inner tube, cut a little bit of it off, wrap it round that chrome first, and then you can get your wrench on it and give it a nice undo in it, and it'll come off. Under that, you'll find that you've got the normal sort of nut that you've got to get your adjustable spanner on, possibly, or even a box spanner, and those are very often very, very tight. They do them up in the factory, and unfortunately they're done up so tightly that they're not easy to undo. In the old days, what we used to do when we fitted a set of new taps, we always used to do what we called just crack the thread or break the thread open, which was that you would get your wrench and just undo them slightly, then do them up again, just so that that would help in the future if anybody changed the washer. But those days are gone. Nobody thinks of the next person coming along, and nobody has time to do that kind of thing now, so you find that they're done up a little bit too tightly. Anyway, that's all there is to it, Alex, so hopefully your sister-in-law will have a non-dripping tap in the future. I bet she'll have another job for you after that though, mate. Once you start, there's no going back. And here's a great little one from Tim Margereson. He says he's a sole trader, works on his own, does all his own labouring, groundworks, everything from start to finish except for his plumbing and his electrics. And he said he works for a handful of customers who he works for on a regular basis, so he doesn't have to go very far for his jobs. He's working in his local area, he's trusted, and because he does it all himself, he's not having to pay out other people, but he can keep control of the job. So he's just showing us that he's about to start another job, and he said it's probably going to take him 12 months working on your own. That's the way it is. And he said that he'd love to see us. We can pop in for a cup of tea anytime we like. You know, we'd love to get around and see more building projects, more builders, and it just goes to show that what Tim's doing here, if we get a lot of questions from young builders trying to get going on their own, and how do I do it? This is the way forward. What Tim is saying is just do all your own work, do it properly, and you don't need to have that many customers. You don't need this great churn of people, because if you find a few customers and you grow old with them, and they keep you busy. Let's face it, a lot of these people have got a bit of money and they don't want to do this work themselves. So when I was plumbing, I would go around and change light bulbs for customers, because they didn't want to get up on a step ladder or a chair and change a light bulb. So they'd phone me up, my light bulb's gone, can you come round and change it? I'd go round and change it. I probably wouldn't even charge them, actually. Just go in, have a cup of tea, bit of cake, and just wait for the day they were going to give me a bigger job, and so on. But it's that kind of thing of building up your customer base, of getting them to trust you, and you trusting them, so that you know you're going to get paid. And it's a great life if you can get that kind of work, and you can be happy, not getting too big, not starting to employ loads of people with all the stress that involves. Then I think you can have a very happy time of it. I look forward to seeing you, Tim. We'll give you a shout if we're coming up that way, but we are getting out and about this year, so who knows, we might be in your area very soon. So here's a question from 007. Hello James, how are you doing? I didn't know you were a keen fan of DIY, but there you go. You say you're doing your mum's bathroom up, and you're going to be using elements board, and you want to fix it straight to the wall, but you don't want to put battens on there. So you're wondering about dot and dabbing it. Now, if the wall is flat, you can certainly dot and dab it with a very thin skim of tile adhesive and just push it down onto that. There's no need to build it out in any sort of meaningful way. If you can just find the few areas to stick it to, then good cement-based tile adhesive, the kind you mix up. Don't use the stuff in the tub, but mix your own and put that on the back of the board in a few places and push it against the wall, and you'll find that it will stick beautifully and you'll be able to tile straight onto that. So there is no need to fix it with battens or anything else. Now, the other question you got is that he wants to run a bit of a wet room, and he wants to use plywood on the floor followed by elements board. Is plywood okay? Yes, it is if you cover it up with elements board. I wouldn't use plywood with tiles in a wet room unless it's covered with something like a good tanking system, elements board or whatever. And the other thing is he's got a bath panel that he wants to make the side of the wet room, if you like. So it's going to get wet, it's going to take water from the shower, but he wants to seal that, but he wants to seal it in such a way that he can remove it in the future if he needs to. Now, I would suggest make a good job of that plumbing behind the bath panel, so it's very unlikely you'll ever have to remove it. Then just simply silicone along the bottom of the bath panel where you need that waterproof joint to be made. You could actually use some No More Leaks tape, and you could put a wooden batten along the back of the panel there and then just run the tape up the wooden batten, so you made a kind of a little step that way, so that if any water went under the panel, it would only reach the No More Leaks tape and it wouldn't go anywhere else. So that would be, to my mind, a good solution, is to use that tape, and then if you want to put in a thin bead of silicone afterwards, you can do that. And if you need to get that access that underside of the bath for any maintenance on the plumbing, you can simply get yourself a Stanley knife and cut along the bead of silicone, take the bath panel out, do your job, then put it back, scrape off the bit of silicone, re-gun that in, and that to me would be a good solution. A lot of people do that kind of thing, and it's not very often, let's face it, it's not very often you need to take those panels out, but I do appreciate that you don't want to make it so that you never can. Anyway, that's my little bit of advice, and it looks like it'd be a nice little project for you. So here we have a question from Lennon, not the one who manages Celtic, I don't think, another one. He said that he's working on his bathroom here, and he's just taking out the old tray there, which is a one on legs. I hate those, I really hate those. I want it flat on the floor. And what he's struggling with is, he said that that tray is slightly bigger than the standard sizes. He also wants to put a screen across there, and he can't find a screen that is that size. He said it's got 1030 width, but the trays are 1000. So basically what you're looking for, Neil, is you're looking to get rid of 30 millimeters. And the easiest way to get rid of 30 millimeters is to put yourself a little bit of false wall at one end of the shower tray, and that can accommodate your pipe work for your shower valve and everything else, so it's not wasted space as such. And then it means that you've got a wall-to-wall tray, you've got a standard 1000 tray, you've got a standard screen, and you've saved yourself an awful lot of trouble. So losing 30 millimeters is not hard. It's, if you look at something like elements board, 12.5 millimeters, that's going a good way towards it. And then just get yourself a bit of batten and put that onto the wall first, and then screw the elements board to that, and then you've got a nice snug fit wall to wall for your shower tray, and then your screen will go in there perfectly and everything will be happy. You certainly won't find a shower tray to fit that space now. They're gone. If they ever existed, they're gone. But that's the way I do it. I always make up that little bit of space. Don't put a little lip on there, as some people do, because that's a nightmare. That catches the water and it inevitably leaks or gets mouldy. Just bring the wall up straight on either end of the shower tray. You could do it if you're looking for 30 mil, by the way. Let's think about this. You've got 25, if you put a bit of elements board either end, 12.5 mil either end, that's going to take care of 25 millimeters. So you're only then after 30 millimeters. So if you dot and dabbed that elements board on both ends, that would do it. You would get rid of 30 millimeters without any trouble at all, and that would be equidistant. So that would be my solution to it. I think that's the best way to do it. Forget that bit of stud work, as I said, just stick a bit of board on either end, pack it out slightly, and the job's done. Here's a question from Bill Booth. Now, Bill, this is slightly complex, so some of you are going to be lost on this, but what he's doing is he's building an extension. Now, these days we have what we call fix profiles or wall starter kits, and what you do is you bolt those to the wall. That's like 2 train tracks running down the wall, if you like, and then you build the new brickwork off that. Now, the outer skin is fine because the outer skin is connected to the inner skin. But then when you build the inner skin, which is a cavity wall construction, you're still connecting that inner skin to the existing outer skin of the wall, if you like. Now, what he's saying is, surely that makes cold bridging. You're transferring cold from the old external wall to the new internal wall, and he's saying, shouldn't we cut a slot down that brickwork in order to connect up? Now, if you do that, you tend to weaken the wall, so it's not very common to do it. Now, what you could do is you could cut that piece of brickwork out completely, and you could run that internal wall back to the internal wall of the existing house, which would make the perfect scenario, because you would then have internal wall connected to internal wall, external wall connected to external wall, and you wouldn't have this cold bridging problem. You would be continuing the cavity all the way round. But having said that, a lot of people don't bother. I would say that probably 80% of the jobs I see, they just put both starter kits up against the existing outer wall, and they run the new walls off the existing outer wall. It's a very strong and stable way of doing it, and you do get a bit of thermal bridging, you get a bit of cold transfer across, but it's not huge. By the time it's gone across that cavity, what you could do in a situation like that, you could even put a bit of insulation behind the starter, the fix profile, if you look, like the starter kit, and that would prevent that cold bridging coming into the wall at that point. So something like that, something like a bit of foam insulation sandwiched behind that starter kit would be a good idea, but most people don't bother. What you could also do is you could also put a bit of insulation along the inside of that wall to stop that thermal bridging. But I appreciate the point, and I have thought about this myself in a number of occasions and thought, shall I do it? But in practice it doesn't make a huge amount of difference, and I think it's quite hard to avoid thermal bridging. I know people do it, and I know they get very, very anal about it, if you like. They have to take care of every tiny detail, but I think, come on, we've got to live a little bit. Look on the drawing. If the drawing calls for that brickwork to be cut with the slot, then I think you're going to have to do it. But if it doesn't, then I would just go on with the profiles and be done with it. Life's too short. And here we got a little question from Bandy, and he says that he's got a little outhouse and that it suffers from cold and damp and mildew and all the rest of it, and it's got a concrete roof, and he's wondering what he can do to cure this and what's the best way of going around it. Now, it's a 4-inch wall, so it's only a single skin wall, so whatever you do, it's not going to have a great deal of effect unless you put some insulation in there. Then you've got to think about ventilating it and heating it, which could be expensive. It depends what you're going to use this outhouse for. I mean, I know a lot of these outhouses, they were built on a lot of ex-council houses, now a lot of them private ownership, but they were kind of deemed a useful little area for putting a washing machine. They are not habitable because they're not built to that standard that you're going to get decent insulation in there. But I think the key to it is to ventilate them. Just get some ventilation going through there, and if that means putting an extractor fan in there that's running every so often, then so be it. But I don't think there's an awful lot you can do about the brickwork. It's a 4-inch wall. You can put some storm dry on the outside of it to stop any penetrating damp, and that would help. The roof doesn't look like it's leaking. It looks like there's just condensation, but I think the key thing there is to just get some airflow going through it and dry it out like that. Certainly don't start bleaching the walls or anything like that, because that will attract more moisture. You can use some kind of biocide in there to cure the mould. Unless you're going to invest money in putting proper insulation in there, proper ventilation and heating, it will never be part of your house. This is the thing. People expect an awful lot from garden sheds and outhouses and so on, and they don't expect to put very much in there in the way of heating. So with that in mind, you've got to kind of manage your expectations, if you like. Decide what you want to do. If you want to spend a lot of money on it, and you want to make it into a good space, let's say you use it as an outside office or something like that, then I would think it would be worth doing. But in this case, if it's only somewhere that you want to store the occasional thing, then it's probably not worth spending a fortune on. But there you are, that's why they build houses with cavity walls and better insulation, because otherwise they would all suffer from exactly the same problems as this outhouse has.